A millionaire crosses paths with a girl scavenging for food in the rain right on Fifth Avenue. Her phrase strikes him like lightning. Not everyone has a choice. Touched by this, he decides to change her life, and his own too. But his gesture ends up exposing a rotten scheme that could cost him everything he has. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We're continuing. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The rain fell mercilessly on Fifth Avenue, transforming New York City into a labyrinth of lights reflected on the wet asphalt. Augustus Miller watched the movement through the armored window of his imported car, feeling that familiar sense of emptiness that had pursued him since the accident. At 45, president of one of the largest tech companies in the USA, he had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered. "Shall we turn back, sir?" asked James, his driver for over a decade. "This area is flooded. No, let's wait a bit. The rain should pass." The truth was, Augustus was in no hurry to return to his penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side. The silence of that place suffocated him more than any New York City traffic jam. It was then that his eyes caught an unusual movement. A small figure crouched near a dumpster, rummaging with determination among plastic bags. A girl, no more than 10 years old, drenched to the bone, but with unwavering concentration in her search. "Stop the car, James." "Here, sir. It's not safe and—" "Now!" Augustus adjusted his wheelchair as James got out to open the door. Adapting the vehicle to accommodate his condition had cost a small fortune, but nothing replaced the autonomy he had lost 3 years ago. The accident in the Appalachian Mountains had taken more than his mobility. It also took his confidence, his fiancée, and most importantly, his will to live. Sheltered by the awning of a closed store, he observed the girl. Her curly hair, plastered to her face by the rain, didn't hide lively, attentive eyes. Her simple yet clean clothes indicated poverty, but not neglect. There was something disconcerting in her dignity, as if being there in the rain was a choice and not an imposition of life. When their gazes finally met, Augustus expected to see fear, pity, or perhaps the expression of someone preparing to beg. Instead, he found curiosity and a tranquility that completely disarmed him. "Are you also looking for food?" the girl asked, approaching without hesitation. Her voice was clear, articulate, surprisingly mature for her age. "No, I've already had dinner," Augustus replied, disconcerted. "Lucky you," she smiled, showing a small gap between her front teeth. "I'm looking for my mom's dinner. She works late and always comes home hungry." Augustus felt a lump in his throat. The naturalness with which that child spoke about rummaging through trash for food hit him like a punch to the stomach. "You shouldn't. I mean, this isn't—" he began, but was interrupted by an impatient gesture from the girl. "I know it's not ideal, sir, but there's a lot of good food people throw away, especially here near the fancy restaurants." Without knowing exactly why, Augustus took out his phone and called the restaurant where he had dined earlier. In less than 15 minutes, a delivery person arrived with a package of still-warm food. Augustus handed it to the girl, who seemed to assess the situation with wisdom beyond her years. "Thank you," she said, accepting the package with the same dignity with which she had rummaged through the trash. "But you know, nothing comes for free in this life. I can do something in return. You don't have to." "Yes, I do. Everything has an exchange, my mom says. Otherwise, we end up owing." Augustus smiled, charmed by the seriousness of that small figure. "And what would you have to offer me?" The girl tilted her head, studying him for a moment, her eyes moving down to his wheelchair and back to his face. Then, with the devastating simplicity of children, she declared, "I can teach you to walk again." Augustus's smile froze. "My injury is permanent." "Doctors have tried everything." "Not with your legs," the girl replied as if it were obvious. "To walk with your heart. Yours seems to have been still for a long time." The impact of those words made Augustus recoil instinctively, as if he had been physically hit. That child, appearing out of nowhere on a rainy night, had seen right through him with surgical precision. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to regain control of the situation. "Sophia," she replied, extending her small, damp hand. "Sophia Rivers." "And you, sir?" "Augustus Miller." "An emperor's name," she smiled. "My teacher talked about an Augustus in history class. He was important, like you seem to be. Before Augustus could reply, the rain intensified again, forcing Sophia to take better shelter under the awning. "I need to go," she said, clutching the package to her chest. "My mom will be worried, but I come here almost every day after school." "Wait," Augustus stopped her. "Where do you live?" "I can take you." Sophia hesitated for the first time. "My mom says not to get into strangers' cars, even the ones who seem nice." "Your mom is right," he agreed, feeling a strange respect for this unknown woman who, despite the difficulties, was raising her daughter well. "But it's raining heavily. Let James take her safely." Sophia looked at the driver, who waited patiently under an umbrella, and then back at Augustus. There was something in her eyes, a deep assessment that seemed to see beyond appearances. "All right," she finally agreed, "but only to the entrance of the community. I don't like people seeing the fancy car stopping at my door. It causes trouble." On the way, Sophia talked non-stop about her school, her dreams of being a scientist, the old computer she had fixed herself, and how she helped her mom selling homemade sweets on weekends. Every word revealed a universe of resilience and hope that violently contrasted with the darkness Augustus had allowed to consume his own life. "It's here," Sophia indicated. When they arrived at the entrance of the Harlem Heights community. "Thank you for the food, Mr. Augustus. Just call me Augustus, and thank you for the conversation." Sophia smiled, that luminous smile that seemed to disregard all the harshness around her. "Our first lesson was today," she declared seriously. "Tomorrow we'll continue if you want to learn to walk again." As the car drove away, taking Sophia to her world so distant from his, Augustus realized that something had changed within him. A small spark, almost imperceptible but undeniably real. For the first time in 3 years, he felt a desire to know what the next day would bring. "Where to now, sir?" asked James. Augustus remained silent for a moment, observing the city lights through the fogged window. "Tomorrow," he finally said. "I want to come back here tomorrow." The next morning, Augustus woke up earlier than usual. The conversation with Sophia had stirred something dormant within him. As his personal assistant, Richard, read the day's agenda, Augustus found himself thinking about Harlem Heights, a place he only knew through police headlines or social projects his company sponsored to improve its corporate image. And at 2 o'clock, a board meeting to discuss international expansion, Richard concluded, looking over his glasses. "Augustus, are you listening to me?" "Cancel my appointments this afternoon," Augustus said, surprising even himself with the sudden decision. "All of them? But the board meeting is crucial for—" "Reschedule them for tomorrow. Say I had an unforeseen circumstance." Richard, after 3 years as his right-hand man, knew how to recognize a tone that brooked no argument, even though he was visibly confused by his boss's change in behavior. At 4 in the afternoon, Augustus's car stopped again at the entrance of the Harlem Heights community. The transformation was striking. What the night before had seemed a gloomy place under the rain now teemed with life and color. Children ran, music played loudly, and the air carried the aroma of food being prepared. "Are you sure you want to go in, sir?" James asked, uncomfortable. "I can try to locate the girl and bring her here. It won't be necessary. We'll go in." The arrival of an imported car accompanied by a man in a wheelchair obviously caused a stir. Children approached, curious, while adults watched with suspicion. Augustus could feel the stares, the unvoiced questions, the automatic judgment. "Augustus!" Sophia's familiar voice cut through the air, and the crowd parted as she came running towards him. "You really came?" The girl's genuine smile dissipated some of Augustus's discomfort. Sophia wore her school uniform and carried a backpack that seemed too big for her small body. "You said we'd have a lesson today," he replied, trying to appear casual, as if visiting inner-city communities were part of his routine. "Sophia, who is this man?" Her feminine voice, firm and suspicious, sounded from behind the girl. Augustus looked up and found a woman of approximately 35, with curly hair pulled back in an improvised bun, eyes of the same dark and penetrating hue as Sophia's. She wore the uniform of a cleaning company, and her gaze alternated between fierce protectiveness and exhaustion. "Mom, this is Augustus. He gave me food yesterday, remember? The one that was so delicious." The woman narrowed her eyes, assessing Augustus from head to toe. "Louisa Rivers," she introduced herself dryly without extending a hand. "And may I know what you want with my daughter?" The hostility was palpable, and Augustus immediately understood its origin. A rich man appearing out of nowhere, interested in a child. Any mother would be on high alert. "Augustus Miller," he replied, keeping his voice calm. "Your daughter and I met by chance yesterday. She is extraordinary." "That I know," Louisa crossed her arms. "What I don't know is what a businessman in a car, worth more than all the houses on this street combined, is doing here." Louisa's frankness was disconcerting. There was none of the automatic respect or deference Augustus was accustomed to receiving. To her, he wasn't the powerful CEO of a multinational corporation, but merely a potentially dangerous stranger near her daughter. "Mum." "He came for the lesson," Sophia interrupted, seemingly oblivious to the tension. "I said I was going to teach him to walk again." Louisa's face softened for an instant, looking at her daughter with a mixture of love and concern. Then she turned back to Augustus. "Look, Mr. Miller, I appreciate your kindness yesterday, but we don't need charity or a rich man with remorse trying to feel better. We have our dignity." "It's not charity," Augustus replied, surprising himself with the sincerity in his voice. "Your daughter said something yesterday, something that made me think." For the first time in a long time, a small group of residents had formed, observing the scene with curiosity. Among them, Augustus noticed a young man of approximately 20 who stared at him with particular intensity, an old laptop under his arm. "Please," Augustus continued, "I'd like to talk, that's all." Louisa studied him for another moment, as if she could read his true intentions. Finally, she let out a sigh. 15 minutes. At Mrs. Zoe's diner. It's the most public place around here. The diner was a simple yet surprisingly welcoming space. Mrs. Zoe, a grey-haired woman with an easy smile, seemed to know everyone by name. The place was full of workers returning home, students doing homework, and elderly people playing dominoes. "So what do you really want?" Louisa asked, after Sophia had gone out to play with other children, still visible through the diner window. "Honestly, I don't know," Augustus admitted. "I just felt I needed to come back." "Because of something a 9-year-old said?" Louisa raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "Exactly." He smiled, acknowledging the absurdity of the situation. "Sophia said my heart was still. And she's right." Louisa observed him more closely, as if truly seeing him for the first time. "The accident," she finally said. "Was that when it happened?" Augustus was surprised. "How do you know about the accident?" "Google," Louisa shrugged. "As soon as Sophia told me about you yesterday, I looked up your name. Augustus Miller, CEO of Tech Global. Accident in the Appalachian Mountains 3 years ago." "I'm not ignorant, Mr. Miller, just poor." The direct answer caught him off guard, but also sparked his respect. There was intelligence in Louisa's eyes, a shrewdness that contrasted with her work as a cleaner. "Did you go to college?" he asked, intrigued. 3 semesters of business administration before Sophia was born," Louisa replied, a slight bitterness in her voice. "Life has other plans sometimes." Her father, "He's not in the picture," she cut in, indicating the subject was closed. Augustus watched Sophia through the window, playing carelessly with other children. "Your daughter seems to have an exceptional education. The way she speaks, the subjects she knows about." A proud smile lit up Louisa's tired face. "I do my best. 2 jobs, so she can attend a private school with a partial scholarship. I read with her every night, even when exhausted. Public library on Saturdays," here she paused. "I don't want her cleaning up other people's messes like me." The determination in Louisa's voice was moving. Augustus realized that, despite the abysmal social differences, there was something that connected them. Both fought daily against circumstances that tried to diminish them. Sophia mentioned a computer she fixed. "A dinosaur I got from a donation from the company where I work," Louisa replied. "She taught herself how to use it. She has a natural talent for technology. At 7, she had already fixed the operating system. Impressive. But useless without opportunities," Louisa completed, pragmatism cutting through maternal pride. What good is talent when all doors are closed? The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the young man Augustus had noticed earlier. He approached the table with studied confidence. "Louisa, all right?" The young man greeted, deliberately ignoring Augustus's presence. "Some people are asking if the typing course will happen on Saturday." "Yes, Ronan. At the association at 9, Louisa gestured towards Augustus. "This is Augustus Miller. He met Sophia yesterday." Ronan finally looked at Augustus, a mixture of suspicion and challenge in his eyes. "The Tech Global guy? What a coincidence. I just read about your company's digital inclusion program." "Very convenient, this visit." "Ronan," Louisa warned. "No, it's all right," Augustus intervened. "What's your criticism of the program?" "A criticism?" Ronan let out a dry laugh. "It's pure marketing. They donate obsolete computers, offer basic typing courses, and then use photos of smiling children to attract investors. Meanwhile, the real knowledge, programming, development, the tools that could truly change lives, remain inaccessible." The young man's assertiveness was impressive, and Augustus recognized the truth in his words. His social responsibility department was, in fact, more focused on creating a good image than on generating real impact. "Do you understand programming?" Augustus asked. "Enough to know how much I don't know," Ronan replied with disarming honesty. "Self-taught, but without a diploma, without opportunity." When Ronan walked away, after a brief nod to Louisa, Augustus realized that much more than 15 minutes had passed. Sophia came back inside, her hair disheveled from playing, and sat down next to her mother. "So, Augustus, did you learn anything today?" the girl asked with the same disconcerting seriousness as the day before. "More than you imagine, Sophia," he replied, looking at Louisa, who observed him with an indecipherable expression. "Much more than you imagine." "You're completely out of your mind, Augustus," Marcus Vaughan bellowed, banging on the boardroom table. "An investment of this magnitude in social responsibility, without any measurable return. The board will eat you alive." 3 weeks had passed since the first meeting with Sophia and Louisa. In that short period, Augustus had completely transformed the company's social responsibility department, increasing its budget by 400% and redesigning its mission. The new project, informally named Walk Again, proposed a revolutionary approach to digital inclusion in the underserved communities of New York City. "I'm not asking for permission, Marcus. I'm communicating a decision," Augustus replied, keeping his voice calm. "And there is a return, just not the kind you can measure in an Excel spreadsheet." "Since when did you become a philanthropist?" "Since when is Tech Global an NGO?" Marcus continued, red with anger. "Our shareholders expect results, not charity." Augustus observed the room. Besides Marcus, 7 other directors stared at him with expressions ranging from skepticism to frank hostility. Only Caroline Davies, the marketing director, seemed genuinely interested. "You're looking at this from the wrong perspective," Augustus argued, spinning his wheelchair around the table. "This isn't about charity. It's about investing in human capital, in innovation, in the future. Underserved communities are filled with wasted talents, brilliant minds without the opportunity to flourish. And since when did you become an expert on inner-city neighborhoods?" Marcus's voice dripped with sarcasm. "A few visits to Harlem Heights, and now you think you understand the reality of these people." The mention of Harlem Heights made Augustus frown. He had not shared with the board the details of his visits to the community, which had become almost daily in recent weeks. His relationship with Sophia and Louisa had deepened, and he found himself eager to hear the girl's stories about her day at school, or Louisa's sharp observations on politics and social inequality. "Your concern about the budget is understandable, Marcus," Augustus replied, ignoring the provocation. "But consider this. What if we could identify and develop exceptional talents before the major universities or international competitors? And what if the next great innovation in artificial intelligence or data security came from someone who, without our intervention, would never have access to the necessary tools to develop their potential?" Caroline leaned forward, interested. "From a marketing perspective, the proposal is pure gold. No other tech company in the USA is doing anything remotely similar on this scale. We could position ourselves as pioneers." "Exactly," Augustus nodded, grateful for the support. "It's not just about donating obsolete equipment or basic computer courses. We're talking about identifying exceptional talents and offering high-level training, access to cutting-edge technology, and eventually, positions at Tech Global itself. And who would coordinate this megalomaniac project?" Marcus asked, still skeptical. I'm thinking of someone who deeply understands the realities of the communities, but also has the intellectual capacity to dialogue with our technical team. Someone who can be a bridge. Between these two worlds, a heavy silence fell over the room as the directors understood the insinuation. You're not thinking of bringing someone from outside for an executive position, are you? Marcus asked, incredulous. Someone without corporate experience, without an MBA, without... Someone with exactly the experience we need and none of us possess, Augustus completed firmly. The decision is made. The project starts in 1 month. When the meeting ended, Marcus was the last to leave, casting Augustus a look that made his opposition clear. Caroline, however, remained. There's something different about you, Augustus, she commented, studying him with curiosity. In the last few weeks, it's as if something has lit up again. Augustus smiled slightly. Let's just say I'm learning to walk again. In the Harlem Heights community, the buzz began as soon as Augustus's car stopped at the entrance. After weeks of regular visits, residents no longer looked with as much suspicion, although there was still curiosity. Children, in particular, had grown accustomed to his presence and frequently gathered around his wheelchair, fascinated by the electronic control and carbon fiber wheels. Ronan watched from afar, leaning against the community center wall. His relationship with Augustus had evolved from open hostility to reluctant respect, especially after the businessman began discussing technology with him, recognizing his self-taught talent. Augustus! Sophia came running to meet him, carrying a tablet he had given her the previous week. Look what I managed to do. On the screen, a rudimentary application created by the girl herself showed an organization system for the small community library. Despite its simplicity, it demonstrated an intuition for interface design that many trained programmers lacked. Impressive, Augustus smiled, genuinely admired. You're learning very quickly. Ronan helped me with some things, Sophia admitted, pointing to the young man. He knows a lot about programming. Where's your mum? At the association, she's teaching basic computer skills to the women of the neighborhood. Augustus nodded, reflecting on how Louisa had quickly transformed into a natural leader in the community. Using the computers donated by Tech Global in recent weeks, she had organized classes for different audiences. Seniors learning to use social media to connect with distant relatives, single mothers developing skills for remote work, young people discovering the fundamentals of programming. At the community center, Augustus found Louisa finishing a class. She patiently explained to a group of women how to create a digital resume. There was a natural authority in her posture, a didactic clarity that captivated everyone's attention. And remember, you are not just cleaners, cooks, or nannies. You are household managers, resource administrators, educators. That's how you should present yourselves. The women nodded, many with tears in their eyes, as if for the first time someone was validating the worth of their work. When the class ended and the group dispersed, Louisa noticed Augustus's presence. You arrived early today, she commented, putting away materials. I needed to talk to you, he replied, moving closer. I have a proposal. Louisa raised an eyebrow, skeptical. In recent weeks, their relationship had transformed into a cautious friendship. She still maintained a certain distance, wary of the intentions of such a powerful man, but she couldn't deny the positive impact he was having on the community. What kind of proposal? She asked, crossing her arms. Tech Global is launching an ambitious digital inclusion project, real, not just for marketing. Augustus paused, searching for the right words. I want you to lead it. Louisa froze, her eyes wide in disbelief. Me? Lead a corporate project? Have you lost your mind? On the contrary, I found it again after a long time. Augustus, I don't have a degree. I don't have corporate experience. You have exactly what we need, he interrupted her. Practical knowledge of the real needs of communities, the ability to communicate and educate, the intelligence to translate technical concepts into tangible benefits, and, most importantly, something no MBA can teach, authenticity. Louisa shook her head, stunned. And Sophia, I have a daughter to raise. The position includes flexible hours and the possibility of working remotely part of the time, and Sophia can attend Tech Global's partner school with a full scholarship. Augustus could see the conflict on Louisa's face. Fear, hope, suspicion, ambition, all mixed in a complex expression. "Why me?" she finally asked. "Really?" "Because you remind me of who I was before I got lost," Augustus replied, with an honesty that surprised both of them. Determined, passionate about making a difference, tireless. And because you see people for who they really are, not just as numbers or resources. Louisa looked away, visibly moved but struggling not to show it. What if I fail? If I'm not capable of dealing with the corporate world, with internal politics, then we'll learn together, Augustus completed. I'm not offering charity, Louisa. I'm offering a partnership. I'm asking for your help to build something that truly matters. At that moment, Sophia ran in, interrupting the conversation. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. "Mom, Ronan said he's going to teach me how to make a game, a real game." Louisa smiled at her daughter, tenderly stroking her hair. Then she turned to Augustus with a determined expression. "With one condition," she finally said. "I don't want favors or special treatment. If I'm going to do this, I want to be treated as an equal. I want respect, not condescension. And I want the project to truly transform lives, not just the company's image." "Deal," Augustus extended. His hand, which Louisa firmly clasped, sealing an agreement that would forever change the course of their lives. Outside, Ronan watched the scene through the window, an enigmatic expression on his face. Beside him, Sophia bounced with excitement, oblivious to the complexities of the adult world, but intuitively certain that something important was happening. "Do you think my mom is going to work with Augustus?" she asked, tugging at Ronan's shirt sleeve. "Looks like it, little one," he replied thoughtfully, "and that's going to change a lot around here." "Change how?" Ronan looked at the girl, a bitter smile on his lips. "Some doors will open. Others might close. It's always like that when different worlds meet." Louisa's heels echoed on the marble floor of Tech Global's office as she walked determinedly towards the boardroom. 6 months had passed since she accepted Augustus's proposal, and each day still felt like a battle in a cultural war. Dressed in a navy blue pantsuit, her hair carefully pulled back in a professional bun, she looked the picture of a successful executive, but the glances she still received in the hallways constantly reminded her that, for many there, she remained an intruder. "Good morning, Coordinator Rivers," Marcus Vaughan's secretary greeted her with a polite but distant smile. "Mr. Vaughan asked me to inform you that he will be 10 minutes late." "Thank you, Vanessa," Louisa replied, maintaining the professional tone she had learned to adopt in that environment. Inside, however, she seethed with irritation. It was the 3rd consecutive time Marcus had been late for the meetings she called, a clear tactic to demonstrate who truly held power. In the empty room, Louisa took the opportunity to review her notes. The Walk Again project had grown exponentially, exceeding all initial expectations. What began as an educational initiative in Harlem Heights now extended to 5 New York City communities, with over 2,000 participants, from children to seniors. The preliminary results were impressive: increased employability, improved academic performance among young people, and even small digital enterprises emerging in the communities. Her cell phone vibrated with a message from Sophia. "Mom, I got an A on my science project. The teacher said he'd never seen anything like it." Louisa smiled, feeling the familiar mix of pride and concern. The new school was exceptional, but the adjustment hadn't been easy for her daughter, the only scholarship student in a class of privileged children. "Sorry for the delay." Marcus entered the room exactly 15 minutes after the scheduled time, accompanied by 2 analysts. His tone made it clear that there was no remorse whatsoever. "Let's get straight to the point. The numbers, please." Louisa took a deep breath, controlling her irritation. "As you can see in the report, the project exceeded its quarterly targets by 42%. The spontaneous media coverage—" Yes, Marcus interrupted her, distractedly flipping through the report. "Very impressive. But we're here to discuss the budget, not to celebrate premature victories." "Premature?" Louisa raised an eyebrow. "The results are concrete, Marcus. The reduction in recruitment costs has already offset 30% of the initial investment, not to mention the value of positive media exposure. The problem, Louisa, Marcus replied, emphasizing her first name as, if it were an undue familiarity, is that the board is concerned about scalability. We've invested millions in 5 communities. How much will it cost to expand to 20, 50? The discussion remained tense for almost 2 hours. For every argument Louisa presented, Marcus had an objection. For every positive data point, he found a negative perspective. It was evident that the clash transcended business matters. It was personal. When the meeting finally ended, Louisa was mentally exhausted, but satisfied. Despite the resistance, she had managed to approve the program's expansion to 3 more communities. A small victory, but significant. In the elevator on her way to the penthouse where Augustus's office was located, she met Caroline, the marketing director. "You were brilliant in that meeting," Caroline commented, with a genuine smile. Marcus left red as a tomato. "Thank you," Louisa replied, surprised by the compliment. Caroline had been one of the few executives to treat her with respect from the start. "Sometimes I feel like I'm swimming against the current." "You are," Caroline confirmed bluntly. "And that bothers a lot of people, especially because you're succeeding." The elevator reached the top floor, and Caroline said goodbye with a firm handshake. "The next institutional campaign will be centered on Walk Again. We're going to show the world what you're building." In Augustus's office, Louisa found her boss immersed in documents, his brow furrowed in concentration. In recent months, their relationship had deepened into a professional partnership based on mutual respect, though sometimes she still felt an indefinable discomfort when they were alone, not out of fear or intimidation, but something more subtle she couldn't name. "How was it with Marcus?" Augustus asked, without lifting his eyes from the papers. "We got the expansion for 3 more communities, but it was a battle." "It was expected," he shrugged. "Marcus is a traditionalist. It will take time for him to accept changes of this magnitude. Or maybe he'll never accept it," Louisa commented, sitting in the chair opposite the desk. "It's not just about change, Augustus. It's about power. About who has the right to be in these rooms making these decisions." Augustus finally looked up, studying her with an intensity that made her look away. "You've changed," he observed. 6 months ago, you could barely look the directors in the eye. Now you face Marcus Vaughan without flinching." "I had to change," she replied simply. "This world doesn't forgive weakness." A comfortable silence settled between them, interrupted only when Augustus's secretary announced over the intercom, "Mr. Miller, Ms. Claudia Montgomery is here to see you." Augustus's face visibly paled, and Louisa noticed his hand tightening on the armrest of his wheelchair. I didn't schedule any meeting with her," he stammered, disconcerted. "She said it's a personal matter, sir." Augustus took a deep breath, regaining his composure. "Please ask her to come in." Turning to Louisa, "Do you mind?" "Of course, I'll finish these reports in my office," Louisa replied quickly, standing up. At the door, she crossed paths with an elegant woman, approximately Augustus's age, impeccably dressed in designer clothes. Their gazes met briefly, the stranger's curious and assessing, Louisa's deliberately neutral. "Louisa," Augustus called before she fully exited. "This is Claudia Montgomery, an old friend." "Ex-fiancée, to be exact," Claudia corrected with a polite smile, extending her hand to Louisa. "And you must be the famous project coordinator, who's the talk of the entire tech market. Augustus talks a lot about you." "A pleasure, Miss Montgomery," Louisa replied, shaking the extended hand and noticing the enormous solitaire gracing her ring finger. "Excuse me." As she walked to her own office, Louisa felt an uncomfortable pang in her chest. There was something about that woman's presence, something that made her suddenly feel out of place, as if she had invaded a space that didn't belong to her. In Harlem Heights, the sun began to set as Louisa's car stopped at the community entrance. Despite her professional ascent and new salary, she had chosen to continue living there, a decision that generated both admiration and suspicion among her neighbors. "Mrs. Louisa! Mrs. Louisa!" Jack, an 8-year-old boy, came running towards her as soon as she got out of the car. "Ronan's teaching us how to use some new programs at the community center. You have to see it." Louisa smiled, stroking the boy's hair. "I'll be right there, Jack. I just need to go home first." The community center, now equipped with state-of-the-art computers donated by Tech Global, was the pulsating heart of the Walk Again project. At that hour it was packed. Teenagers learning basic programming, adults taking online courses, seniors familiarizing themselves with video calls to talk to distant relatives. At the back of the room, Ronan coordinated a group of young people working on computers. His demeanor had changed in recent months, more confident, more focused. After much insistence from Augustus, he had accepted a scholarship to study computer science, though he still maintained a certain distance from the businessman. "Mom!" Sophia ran to hug her as soon as she entered the center. "Look what I made today." On the computer screen, a simple application showed an educational game about recycling, created by the girl herself with Ronan's guidance. The interface was intuitive, colorful, clearly designed by a child for other children. "It's amazing, honey," Louisa smiled, genuinely impressed. "Is Augustus coming today?" Sophia asked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. Over the months, she had developed a special affection for the businessman, who frequently brought books and educational games especially for her. "I don't think so, dear. He's busy today. With the pretty lady who went to visit him." Louisa frowned, surprised. "How do you know that?" "He texted earlier," Sophia shrugged as if it were obvious. "Said he couldn't come because he had an important visit, a friend from before the accident." The familiarity with which her daughter spoke of Augustus caused Louisa an indefinable discomfort. In recent months, she had observed the growing closeness between the two with contradictory feelings. Joy for the good it did Sophia to have a positive male figure in her life, and concern about the inevitable day when Augustus would move on, as all privileged men eventually did. "Louisa," Ronan's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Can we talk for a minute?" They moved to a quieter corner, while Sophia excitedly returned to her computer. "What is it, Ronan?" The young man seemed uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "It's about the project. There are some things happening that you need to know." "What things?" "Rumors," he replied, lowering his voice. "In the community. About you and Augustus." Louisa felt her blood run cold. "What kind of rumors?" "The kind that always arise when a single woman starts to move up in life with the help of a powerful man," Ronan replied, the discomfort evident in his voice. "Especially after you were promoted to coordinator so quickly." "That's ridiculous," Louisa replied, feeling her face burn with indignation. "My relationship with Augustus is strictly professional." "I know that," Ronan hastened to say, "but you know how people are. And it's not just here in the community, at the company also. I heard comments when I was there for the scholarship interview." Louisa closed her eyes for a moment, feeling an enormous weight on her shoulders. It was as if no matter how hard she tried, how much she studied, how much she proved her worth, there would always be someone questioning her legitimacy, attributing her achievements to something other than her own merit. "What else did you hear?" she asked, keeping her voice firm despite the inner turmoil. Ronan hesitated. "There's one more thing. A group of young people from the community is pulling away from the official project. They're creating a kind of parallel movement. They call it free tech. Pulling away how? They think the project is becoming too corporate, too controlled by Tech Global. They want something more revolutionary, without so many rules and structures. They got some used computers and are setting up an alternative space in old Joe Peterson's workshop." Louisa felt a pang of concern. The last thing they needed was a division in the community, especially now that the project was starting to show concrete results. "Are you involved in this, Ronan?" The young man looked away. "They asked me to help with some technical things. They're my friends, Louisa. I grew up with them. And what do you think we should do?" "That's the question," Ronan sighed. "I don't know if there's anything to do. Maybe it's natural for different approaches to exist. Not everyone adapts to the corporate model." At that moment, Louisa's cell phone vibrated with a message. It was from Augustus. "We need to talk. Can I stop by later?" Looking around at the children concentrated on the computers, at the adults proud of their new skills, at her own daughter developing a talent that could change her future, Louisa felt the weight of the responsibility she had taken on. Navigating between two worlds would never be easy, And now with these new challenges, it became even more complex. "Tell them I want to talk," she finally told Ronan. "Not as a representative of Tech Global, but as a resident of the community. As someone who understands both sides." Ronan nodded, visibly relieved. "I'll organize that." As she typed her reply to Augustus, a simple, "Yes, I'll be waiting." Louisa couldn't imagine how this conversation would change the course of their lives. The rooftop of the Tech Global building, 30 stories above the urban chaos of New York City, had been transformed into a true hanging garden. Rows of sunflowers pointed towards the morning sun, their golden faces contrasting with the intense blue of the spring sky. Among them, Sophia ran happily, being photographed by a professional team for the company's new institutional campaign. "Perfect," exclaimed the photographer, capturing the moment the girl reached out to touch one of the giant flowers. "Natural and spontaneous, exactly what we need." Away from the center of the action, Augustus and Louisa observed the photo shoot with contradictory expressions. He visibly proud of the garden he had created, especially for Sophia. She clearly uncomfortable with her daughter's exposure. "Are you sure this is necessary?" Louisa asked in a low voice. "Using a child for corporate marketing. It's not common marketing, Louisa," Augustus replied without taking his eyes off Sophia. "It's the real story of what inspired us, of what made me change." The sunflower garden had been Augustus's idea, inspired by a casual comment from Sophia months earlier. "Sunflowers are like people," the girl had said during one of her visits to the company headquarters. "They always look for the light, no matter where they're planted." The child's observation had touched something deep in Augustus, who decided to transform the underutilized rooftop space into a living symbol of the philosophy behind the Walk Again project. Caroline, leveraging the symbolic potential, had proposed centering the new institutional campaign around the garden and Sophia, the girl who had inspired everything. The idea was powerful, to show how a simple child from a community could transform the vision of one of the largest tech companies in the country. "She seems happy," Augustus commented, watching Sophia pose for more photos, now holding a tablet where her recycling app was running. "She's always happy when she's with you," Louisa replied, a touch of concern in her voice. "Sometimes I think she's forming expectations that, well, that might not be realistic." Augustus turned to face her, intrigued. "What kind of expectations?" Louisa hesitated, carefully choosing her words. "Sophia never had a father figure, and now, suddenly, there's a man in her life who treats her as if she's special, who gives her attention, gifts, opportunities." "She is special," Augustus interrupted her gently. "And I'm not just playing a role, Louisa. I genuinely care about her. About both of you." Something in the way he said "both of you" made Louisa look away, suddenly uncomfortable. Since their conversation after Claudia's visit a month ago, something had changed between them. Augustus had opened up about his past, about the emptiness he felt since the accident, about how meeting Sophia and Louisa had rekindled something he believed was lost forever. "I'm not questioning your sincerity, Augustus," Louisa finally replied. "I'm just concerned about the future. People change. Situations change. And Sophia is just a child who has already experienced too many disappointments for her age." Augustus was about to reply when the rooftop elevator opened, revealing Marcus Vaughn accompanied by two men in impeccable suits. "Ah, the famous photo shoot," Marcus commented, approaching with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The representatives from Sterling Investments arrived early. I thought I'd show them our social initiative." Louisa felt a chill as she noticed the way one of the executives' gaze swept across the rooftop, lingering on Sophia with a clearly skeptical expression. "Mr. Miller," the older man spoke with a heavy American accent, "I must admit that when we discussed investing in Tech Global, I didn't imagine we'd be funding a kindergarten." "Mr. Sterling," Augustus replied, keeping his voice calm but firm, "what you see here is more than a garden. It is the symbol of our new corporate philosophy, one that recognizes that genuine innovation arises from diversity of perspectives." "Philosophy doesn't pay dividends," Sterling retorted, dryly. "But results do," Louisa intervened, stepping forward. "And the Walk Again project has already demonstrated tangible returns in terms of institutional image, reduced recruitment costs, and the development of original intellectual property. Sterling turned his attention to her, visibly surprised by her intervention. "And you are—" "Louisa Rivers, executive coordinator of the project." An uncomfortable silence settled, broken only by the distant sound of photographs being taken. Louisa could feel Marcus's gaze on her, a mixture of irritation and something more, something almost predatory. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation in the boardroom," Augustus suggested, sensing the growing tension. "I can show you the concrete numbers," Louisa mentioned. When the group headed for the elevator, Marcus stayed behind, approaching Louisa with an artificial smile. "Impressive how quickly you adapted to the role of an executive," he commented, low enough for only her to hear. Augustus always had a good eye for promising talents. "If you have something to say, Marcus, say it directly," Louisa replied, keeping her voice firm despite her rising anger. Marcus's smile widened, but his eyes remained cold. "I just find it curious how certain careers take off overnight, especially when they involve attractive women and lonely bosses. But I'm sure your merit is indisputable." Before Louisa could respond, he had already walked away, following the group to the elevator. She remained on the rooftop, feeling her blood boil in her veins and a corrosive doubt settling in her mind, the same doubt the rumors in the community had planted. Did people really believe that her position was the result of something other than her own competence? 3 days later, the tranquility of Sunday morning was interrupted by a call from Caroline. The marketing director's voice was filled with unusual urgency. "Louisa, you need to come to the company now." "What happened?" "The rooftop." "The garden." Caroline hesitated, her voice choked. "Someone broke in during the night, destroyed everything." When Louisa arrived at Tech Global headquarters, she found Augustus already on the rooftop, his wheelchair stopped among the wreckage of what was once an exuberant sunflower garden. The plants had been torn out, trampled, systematically destroyed. In the center, spray-painted in red on the concrete, a cruel message: "Charity is not justice." "I've already alerted security," Caroline informed, visibly shaken. "They're analyzing the camera footage, but the intruders were wearing masks." Louisa observed the scene of destruction, feeling a pang of pain whose intensity surprised her. That garden had become more than a backdrop for photos or a corporate symbol. It was a space of hope, a reminder that beauty could flourish in the most improbable places. "Do you have any idea who could have done this?" Caroline asked hesitantly. Louisa thought of the dissenting group in the community, the free tech movement Ronan had mentioned. She thought of the envious glances she received from some neighbors, the malicious gossip about her rapid ascent. She thought of Marcus and his thinly veiled resentment. The possibilities were many and none of them comforting. "No," she finally replied, "I'm not sure." Approaching Augustus, she noticed he held a single sunflower, partially damaged, but still intact enough to be recognizable. His eyes were fixed on it, an expression of desolation Louisa had never seen before, not even when he spoke about the accident. "I said it was foolish," he murmured, without looking up. "A silly sentimentality, that a garden wouldn't change anything." But Sophia was so happy. The mention of Sophia made Louisa shiver. Her daughter had planned to come to the rooftop that afternoon to see the sunflowers again. The disappointment would be devastating. "We'll rebuild it," she said, placing a hand on Augustus's shoulder. Stronger, more beautiful. He finally looked up to face her, and Louisa saw something broken in his eyes, a vulnerability that transcended the physical destruction around them. "It's not just about the garden, Louisa. It's what it represents." Someone wanted to send a message that no matter how hard we try, there will always be those who resist change, who resent any attempt to unite different worlds. "Or perhaps the message is another," she replied after a moment of reflection. "That true change is difficult, painful, and never happens without resistance. That uniting different worlds requires more than good intentions. It requires persistence in the face of obstacles." Augustus observed her for a long moment, as if seeing something new in her face. Finally, a small smile touched his lips. "Sophia gets her wisdom from someone." The arrival of Sophia, accompanied by Ronan, completely transformed the atmosphere of the rooftop. Contrary to the expected reaction of sadness or disappointment, the girl observed the destruction with a disconcerting calm. "We can plant new ones," she declared simply after a moment. all together this time. The simplicity of the solution, coming from a child, provoked a reflective silence among the adults. It was Ronan who spoke first, stepping forward hesitantly. "I can help," he offered, looking directly at Augustus. "And I know other people who would help too. People from the community." The look they exchanged contained more than words could express, a mutual recognition, a silent understanding that repairing damage was more important than pointing fingers. The next day, Tech Global's rooftop witnessed an unprecedented scene. Executives in formal attire working side by side with community residents, replanting sunflowers. Sophia coordinated the operation with the adorable seriousness of a child entrusted with an important purpose, distributing tasks and compliments with equal generosity. Caroline, always attentive to media potential, ensured that the moment was properly recorded. "This is more powerful than any advertising campaign we could create," she commented, observing the diverse group united by a common purpose. Among the volunteers, Louisa noticed Marcus's absence but chose not to comment. Some would resist until the end, and that was part of the transformation process. When the last sunflower was planted, Sophia asked for everyone's attention. With the surprising poise that was her trademark, she climbed onto a small bench and addressed the group. "Thank you for helping to rebuild our garden," her childish voice rang clear on the silent rooftop. "My teacher said that sunflowers are resilient plants. They always come back even after storms. Like strong people." Gazes turned instinctively to Augustus in his wheelchair, to Louisa, who had overcome so many obstacles, to the young people of the community who fought daily against a system designed to exclude them. "This garden now belongs to all of us," Sophia continued, with the disconcerting wisdom of children. "And when the flowers grow again, they will be even more beautiful, because they were planted with love by different people working together." At the end of the impromptu speech, spontaneous applause erupted. Louisa noticed tears in the eyes of some executives, an expression of surprise and respect in others. Something had changed on that rooftop, not just the physical garden, but something deeper in the company's culture. As the crowd began to disperse, Augustus approached Louisa, who was watching Sophia interact animatedly with a group of children from the community. "You were right," he said softly. "About the message. About persisting." Louisa smiled, feeling a wave of something indefinable, deeper than pride, more complex than gratitude. "Sophia always had that ability," she replied, "to transform obstacles into opportunities, to see possibilities where others only see problems." "Like her mother," Augustus commented, his gaze intense on her. Before Louisa could reply, a buzz on the other side of the rooftop caught her attention. Ronan had approached a group of executives and was showing something on his tablet, apparently a system he had developed for remote monitoring of the garden with humidity and sunlight sensors. "See?" Louisa smiled. "It's already happening. Connections that wouldn't exist without this moment." On the New York City horizon, the sun began its descent, casting a golden light over the rooftop and the small, newly planted sunflower sprouts. It was impossible not to see there a metaphor for what they were building, something still fragile, vulnerable to storms, but with the potential to grow strong and transformative. What no one could imagine in that moment of celebration was that the biggest storm was yet to come, in the form of an internal audit that would threaten not only the project, but everything they had built together. "Internal audit now?" Caroline's voice echoed through the boardroom, filled with disbelief. "We're in the middle of the most successful institutional campaign in the last 5 years. Augustus remained silent, observing the varied expressions around the table. The news of the surprise audit of the Walk Again project had dropped like a bomb that Monday morning. Officially, it was a standard procedure for high-investment initiatives, but no one in the room believed that justification. "It was a board decision," explained Richard, Augustus's assistant visibly uncomfortable. Apparently concerns arose about the financial management of the project. "Concerns raised by whom?" Louisa asked directly, her eyes instinctively turning to Marcus's empty chair, who had claimed a last-minute commitment to miss the meeting. "That wasn't specified," Richard replied, unable to meet her gaze. Augustus watched Louisa intently. In the last 9 months, since taking over the project's coordination, She had transformed into a respected executive, capable of navigating complex corporate waters without losing her essence. The insecure and suspicious woman he had met at the Harlem Heights diner had given way to a confident and articulate leader. Still, in this moment, he could see the vulnerability behind her professional facade, the fear that everything she had fought for could crumble. "The timing couldn't be worse," Caroline commented, running a hand through her hair in frustration. "We're 2 weeks away from the national launch, with press coverage already confirmed, testimonials recorded. And unless they find anything compromising, we will proceed with the plan," Augustus intervened, finally breaking his silence. "This is not the first attempt to destabilize the project, and it probably won't be the last." When the meeting ended, Louisa remained in the room, methodically organizing her notes, a strategy Augustus had already identified as her mechanism for processing stressful situations. "They won't find anything," he said softly, moving his wheelchair closer. "Your management has been impeccable, Louisa." She looked up, and the intensity of her concern surprised him. "It's not that simple, Augustus. When powerful people want to find problems, they find them or they create them." The shrewdness of that observation hit him hard. Louisa understood the corporate power game better than he imagined. "Marcus is behind this, isn't he?" She continued, lowering her voice. "He never accepted that someone from outside, especially someone like me, would have so much control over a strategic project." "Probably," Augustus admitted, seeing little point in denying the obvious. "But Marcus isn't the entire board. We have allies. We have you," Louisa corrected, putting her papers into her folder. "And for many, that's part of the problem. They believe your closeness to the project, to me, is clouding your judgment as CEO." The mention of closeness hung in the air between them, laden with unspoken meanings. Over the months, their relationship had evolved into something that defied simple definitions. More than friendship, different from romance, a bond forged through mutual transformations and shared purpose. "My judgment has never been clearer," Augustus finally replied. "Walk Again is not just a social project or a marketing strategy. It is a redefinition of the role that companies like Tech Global should play in society." Louisa studied him for a moment, as if assessing the sincerity of his words. Then, with a small sigh, she stood up. "I have a meeting with the Harlem Heights team in an hour. We need to decide how to communicate this to them without causing panic." "Louisa," Augustus stopped her as she was already at the door. "We'll get through this together." The smile she gave him was a mixture of gratitude and doubt. "Together," she repeated, though her tone didn't carry the same conviction. Tech Global headquarters buzzed with rumors in the following weeks. The audit team, led by a former Federal Reserve employee known for his strictness, had set up in a room near Louisa's and requested access to all documents, emails and financial records related to the project. In Harlem Heights, the news of the audit had created a climate of apprehension. Some residents, fearing that the project might be discontinued, began missing classes and activities. The dissident movement led by young people from free tech gained strength, presenting itself as a non-corporate alternative that would survive regardless of Tech Global's decisions. Amidst this turmoil, Sophia remained a constant source of optimism. At 10 years old, she now attended the prestigious Greenwich Academy with a full scholarship, excelling not only academically, but as a kind of unofficial ambassador between two worlds, that of the economic elite and that of the community. "Mom, I think we should make a special presentation for the auditors," she suggested during dinner, 2 weeks after the audit began. "Show all the apps and games we created in the project. Things they can see and touch, not just numbers in reports." Louisa smiled tenderly at her daughter, admiring her ability to transform challenges into opportunities. "That's a good idea, dear. I'll suggest it to the team." "Is Augustus coming for dinner tonight?" Sophia asked, with the naturalness of someone asking about a family member. "No, he has an important meeting," Louisa replied, feeling a familiar tightness in her chest. Augustus's visits, once almost daily, had become less frequent since the start of the audit, a conscious decision by both to avoid fueling rumors about their relationship. "I miss him," Sophia commented simply, returning her attention to her plate. "Me too," Louisa admitted softly, surprising herself with the involuntary confession. The next morning, Ronan's arrival at the community center interrupted the meeting Louisa was conducting with the local team. His face was pale, his hands trembling as he held his tablet. "You need to see this," he said, ignoring the professional protocols he normally respected. It was just published on the Tech Daily News portal. On the screen, a sensationalist report titled Tech Global Scandal. Documents reveal irregularities in social project. The article cited internal sources and leaked audit documents, suggesting everything from favoritism in supplier contracts to misuse of resources for personal benefit. "This is absurd," Louisa murmured, feeling the blood drain from her face as she read the accusations. "Half of these things don't even make sense. This supposed luxurious renovation of the community center. We barely replaced the flooring and wiring." "The worst part is at the end," Ronan indicated, his voice tense. Louisa continued reading and felt her stomach sink. The article insinuated that her rapid rise in the company was directly linked to a personal relationship with Augustus, citing frequent meetings outside of work, hours and valuable gifts, and a distorted reference to his visits to Harlem Heights and the resources allocated to Sophia through the company's educational program. "My God," she whispered, feeling physically ill. "This will destroy everything. Not just the project, but my reputation, Augustus's image." "Sophia's image," Ronan completed gravely. "They don't mention her name, but anyone familiar with the project knows she's the child prodigy mentioned in the article." The realization hit Louisa like a punch. Her daughter, who was already facing adaptation challenges at her new school, would now be the target of gossip and malicious insinuations. The mere thought made her blood boil. Who would do this? She asked, more to herself than to Ronan. Who benefits from destroying something that is helping so many people? "You know who," Ronan replied, his eyes darkening. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" Before Louisa could reply, her phone rang. It was Caroline, her normally controlled voice now trembling with urgency. "Louisa, did you see the article? Augustus is calling an emergency meeting in an hour. The entire board will be present. You need to come immediately." "I'm on my way," she replied mechanically, then hung up. Turning to Ronan, "I need to go to headquarters. Can you keep an eye on Sophia after school? I don't want her to be alone if this spreads." "Of course," he nodded, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "And Louisa, remember who you are. Don't let them define you." Tech Global headquarters was in a state of controlled chaos when Louisa arrived. Employees conversed in small groups, falling silent as she passed. At the executive floor reception, Augustus's secretary greeted her with a barely disguised look of pity. "Everyone is in the main boardroom," she informed. "Mr. Miller asked you to come in as soon as you arrived." Upon opening the door, Louisa was met by a dozen gazes, some hostile, others concerned, few genuinely supportive. Augustus was at the head of the table, his face tense but determined. Beside him, visibly satisfied, Marcus flipped through what appeared to be a preliminary audit report. "Louisa, thank you for coming," Augustus greeted her formally, indicating an empty seat beside him, a deliberate positioning that went unnoticed by no one in the room. "I believe everyone has already seen the report," he continued, addressing the board. "And before unfounded speculations spread any further, we need to establish some facts." Marcus leaned forward, a thinly disguised smile on his lips. "I think the facts are quite clear, Augustus. The preliminary audit report confirms significant irregularities in the management of the Walk Again project. The hiring of suppliers without proper competitive process, the disproportionate allocation of resources to a single community center, the educational benefits for certain individuals, benefits provided for in the company's official program and available to any employee in an equivalent position," Louisa interrupted, her voice firm despite her internal trembling. "But not all employees have the same access to the CEO," Marcus retorted, the insinuation hanging heavily in the air. One of the oldest board members, a grey-haired gentleman who rarely spoke, raised his hand. "Regardless of personal matters, which frankly should not be our concern, there is a larger problem, public credibility. This report, true or not, is already circulating. Investors are nervous. We need an immediate response." "I agree," said another board member. "And the cleanest response would be to suspend the project until the audit is concluded. and temporarily remove the main individuals involved. Louisa felt the blow like a stab. Removal meant implicit admission of guilt. It meant that everything they had fought for would be interrupted, perhaps permanently. It meant that Marcus had won. "That won't be necessary," Augustus's voice cut through the air, surprisingly firm, "because I know exactly how and why these accusations arose." A tense silence fell over the room as Augustus turned his chair to face Marcus directly. 3 years ago, shortly before my accident, a letter arrived at the company. A proposal for an innovative digital inclusion program in underserved communities, written by a business administration student who worked as a cleaner in one of our buildings. Louisa's heart stopped for an instant. She had never mentioned such a letter to Augustus. She had never even suggested she knew Tech Global before their meeting in Harlem Heights. "That letter never came to my attention at the time," Augustus continued, his eyes still fixed on Marcus, who now appeared uncomfortable, "because someone considered it irrelevant and filed it without a response. That someone is sitting in this room." Marcus paled but maintained his composure. "This is ridiculous. Are we talking about a supposed letter from years ago? What does that have to do with the current irregularities?" "It has everything to do with it," Augustus replied, his voice gaining strength, "because the author of that letter was Louisa Rivers." A murmur of surprise swept through the room. Louisa felt exposed, vulnerable, as if an intimate secret had been revealed against her will. "I discovered this just 2 days ago, when I requested access to the company's complete correspondence archive for that period," Augustus explained. "I wanted to understand why Marcus seemed to have such personal animosity against Louisa from the start. And I found the answer. He recognized her from day one. He recognized the woman whose idea he had dismissed, who now returned not as a cleaner, but as an executive." "This is absurd," Marcus tried to interrupt, but his voice lacked strength. "What is absurd," Augustus continued, relentless, "is that this company ignored a brilliant idea because it came from someone considered insignificant. It's absurd that it took a chance encounter, years later, for us to see the talent that was right before our eyes. And it's even more absurd that now that the project is transforming lives and improving our own organization, someone wants to destroy it out of wounded pride." The room fell into a dense silence. Louisa was paralyzed, unable to fully process what she had just heard. She had written that letter in a moment of naive hope, believing her ideas could be heard regardless of her position. The silent rejection had been another painful reminder of her place in the world, a place she had fought to transcend ever since. "If there is any irregularity here," Augustus concluded, "it is ethical, not financial, and I am primarily responsible for not having created years ago a company where all voices could be heard equally." One of the younger board members, who had remained silent until then, leaned forward. "Mr. Miller, this significantly changes the narrative, but we still have a public relations crisis to manage." "And we will manage it with truth," Augustus replied simply. "I will call a press conference later today. I will tell this story, all of it, including the part where I failed as a leader and how a 9-year-old child taught me more about purpose and vision than any MBA or management book." Caroline, who had remained strategically silent, now smiled openly. "From a marketing perspective, this is pure gold. The real story is infinitely more powerful than any fabricated campaign." The meeting continued for another 2 hours, with strategies being developed and responsibilities distributed. Marcus left before the end, his defeat evident in the way he avoided eye contact with anyone. When it finally ended, only Augustus and Louisa remained in the room. "Why did you never tell me about the letter?" he asked softly when everyone else had left. "Because it didn't matter anymore," Louisa replied, finally finding her voice. "Or at least I thought it didn't. That letter was written by a different woman. More naive, more hopeful. After the rejection, I promised myself I would build my own path without relying on the goodwill of the powerful." "And you did," Augustus smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his eyes. "More than that, you showed me a new path too. You and Sophia." Louisa felt tears threatening to form but held them back. "We still have a lot of work ahead. This crisis will pass, but the structures that made it possible are still there." "Then we'll change them," Augustus replied simply. "Together." The word hung between them, laden with possibilities. 3 months later, Tech Global's rooftop was unrecognizable. What was once an experimental sunflower garden had transformed into a vibrant outdoor educational space, where children from the community and employees' children learned side by side about technology, sustainability, and social entrepreneurship. The Walk Again project, far from being halted by the crisis, had emerged stronger and more deeply rooted in the company's culture. Louisa, now officially Director of Social Impact, observed with satisfaction a group of teenagers presenting their ideas for socially responsible applications to an audience of investors and executives. Among them was Ronan, now a computer engineering student and instructor in the program, guiding the young people with the same mix of technical rigor and social awareness that characterized his approach. "They've grown so much," commented Sophia, now almost 11, standing beside her mother. Her presence on the rooftop was no longer as the project's symbol girl, but as a junior mentor for younger children, a role she had claimed with the seriousness that characterized her. "We all grew," Louisa smiled, putting her arm around her daughter's shoulders. On the other side of the rooftop, Augustus conversed animatedly with representatives from other companies interested in replicating the Walk Again model. His transformation in recent months had been remarkable, not only in his posture as a business leader, but in his relationship with himself and his physical condition. The wheelchair, once a symbol of limitation, now seemed merely a detail in a presence that overflowed with vitality and purpose. When their gazes met across the rooftop, Louisa felt that familiar silent connection, an understanding that transcended words. In recent months, their relationship had found a delicate balance between the professional and the personal, carefully navigating between the roles of colleagues, friends, and something more they had not yet fully defined or explored. The press conference after the scandal had completely transformed the narrative. The story of the rejected letter, the chance encounter years later, and the mutual transformation that followed had captured the public's imagination in a way no advertising campaign could equal. Journalists who came looking for a corporate scandal found instead a story of redemption, purpose, and possibilities. Marcus had resigned the following week, unable to cope with the dramatic change in his position within the company. Rumors indicated that he was now in a lower position at a traditional corporation, where his financial skills were valued, but his resistance to social innovation did not pose an obstacle. Thoughtful? Augustus's voice interrupted her reflections. He had approached silently, while Sophia ran to join a group of children in an activity. "Just contemplating the path we've traveled," Louisa replied, smiling. "Sometimes it still feels unreal, from a Fifth Avenue dumpster to a corporate rooftop." "Without forgetting the detours and obstacles along the way," Augustus completed, his gaze softening. "Sophia would be proud of us. We finally learned to walk." "With our hearts," Louisa agreed, remembering her daughter's words that first night. "We still have a long way ahead." "And I couldn't ask for better company for the journey," Augustus replied, extending his hand. After a moment of hesitation, Louisa accepted it, their fingers intertwining naturally. On the New York City horizon, the sun began to set, casting a golden light over the sunflowers that now grew strong and vibrant, symbols of resilience, of transformation, of beauty emerging from the most improbable places. Like two people from different worlds who, through an extraordinary child, had discovered that the true path is never walked only with legs, but always and above all with the heart. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the journey of Augustus, Louisa, and Sophia has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories that explore the contrasts and connections of American society. Find it by clicking the link to your left. If this narrative awakens something in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Daily, we bring unique stories that navigate the complexities of life and make us reflect on our own paths. Which character touched your heart the most? Sophia with her childlike wisdom, Louisa with her unwavering determination, or Augustus on his journey of rediscovery? Share with us in the comments. Until our next story,